Bonjour les élèves. Next, I would like to help you understand how to use qui and que, which are relative pronouns. We'll use them in both the present tense and the passé composé. Qui and que are very helpful in helping you write more mature sounding, more complicated sentences that are less repetitive. So, really valuable um, skill to have. So, the most important thing for you to understand is that the word qui, I want you to separate it in your mind from the interrogative pronoun qui, which means who. So we're very comfortable with seeing like qui parle à Sophie, who's talking to Sophie. We're very accustomed to seeing that as an interrogative pronoun, which means who. What I'm talking about here is a relative pronoun, and so it does not always mean who. It's there's in some cases you could say who, but usually we want to translate it as which or that. Okay. So separate that in your mind, but the most important thing is that it will serve as the subject of a phrase that we're gonna, the type of phrases that we're gonna see, and que will function as a direct object. Okay, so whenever you have choppy sentences like this one, Jacques est le voisin. Tu connais Jacques. You see how I've mentioned Jacques twice here, right in a row. That's not necessary. So to avoid that repetition, I'm gonna think about, well, I'm not gonna change anything in the first part of my sentence. Jacques est le voisin. But I'm gonna look at my second sentence and I'm gonna ask myself, what was repeated here? It was Jacques. Well, the thing that was repeated here, was it the subject of this sentence or was it the direct object of this sentence? Tu connais Jacques. Clearly, the subject is tu. So it was the direct object that was repeated. Jacques is the direct object. Therefore, I need to use que to connect these sentences. Now, whether I've used qui or I've used que, the connection is going to go here because le voisin is the thing that we're kind of bringing into the next phrase, okay? Um, Jacques is the neighbor, le voisin. So we're going to take the word neighbor and we're going to say he's the neighbor that you know, right? So we need the word que right there. And le voisin is the antecedent. An antecedent is it's a word that a pronoun is referring to. Okay. So Jacques est le voisin que is referring to le voisin, saying that you know. Okay. Jacques est le voisin que tu connais. Okay. Here's a similar sentence. Is Jacques again. But this time, when I've talked about Jacques twice, I used il the second time. Doesn't sound as repetitive, but I'm still just saying Jacques est le voisin. Jacques habite dans la maison bleue. Very choppy sentence. What I can do is I can use qui here instead, and I can combine this into one sentence. Jacques est le voisin qui habite dans la maison bleue. Qui takes the word voisin, the neighbor that lives, right? So it makes le voisin the subject of the next part of the sentence, the subject of the word lives. I can say le voisin habite, so I can say le voisin qui habite, right? Okay, so those are my present tense examples. Just remember the important part is that you're taking a word and you're making that word either the direct object or the subject of the next thing that you're going to say. So qui, we use it for subjects, and que we use for direct objects. Okay. Um, so next I have some passé composé examples. J'ai vu un film, le film était intéressant. Which thing is repeated? Film. I've said film twice. Well, I don't want to do that. So I want to take that out of there. Now, from this part that I want to remove it from, it was functioning as a subject. What do I use for subject? Qui. J'ai vu un film qui était intéressant. Okay? Nous avons regardé le livre. Tu as emprunté le livre. Okay? We looked at a book. You loaned me the book. We looked at the book that you loaned me. So le livre has to stay there. It's the antecedent. I'm going to use the word que to refer to it, to link it into my next sentence. That's kind of standing in as a pronoun, so now I don't need to say le livre twice, but this is going to go right here, right after the first time I mentioned le livre. Then I'm going to put que to grab onto that as my direct object of the second part of the sentence. Nous avons regardé le livre que tu as emprunté. Now, this is a passé composé sentence. And I want to remind you that anytime we have a direct object coming before a past participle in the passé composé, we must make agreement between that direct object and the past participle. In this case, it was un livre, which is masculine singular, so there's nothing fancy to do. But in a later example, I'll skip down to j'ai acheté la robe. J'ai acheté la robe. Tu as choisi la robe. So you chose a dress and I bought it. I bought the dress that you chose. It's clearly the direct object. The dress didn't choose anything. It was chosen. You chose it. So it's the direct object. Okay. So, j'ai acheté la robe que tu as choisie. But because la robe is before choisi in this sentence and is also its direct object, chose what? Chose the dress. We need to make agreement with la robe. So, j'ai acheté la robe que tu as choisi. We add an E because la robe is feminine. Okay, we'll look at the next example. Elle a mangé les sandwichs. J'ai préparé les sandwichs. Sandwich is mentioned twice. In the second phrase, it is the direct object. Therefore, I will use que for direct objects. But que needs to go right after the first time I said les sandwichs. Okay. Elle a mangé les sandwichs que j'ai préparés. But how do we spell que j'ai préparé? We're going to put an S on that because sandwich is plural. All right. So pretty simple. Okay. I'm going to go back to this. On a écrit une chanson. The reason I skipped over it at the time is the one above it and the two after it had direct objects, but on a écrit une chanson, sure, it's the direct object of the first sentence, but when I mention the chanson again, it's functioning as the subject. In the second part of what I want to say about the song is the subject of that sentence. The song is beautiful. So because it's the subject here, I will use qui to connect it. On a écrit une chanson qui est très belle. Okay, so this agreement thing isn't relevant because that's only when we have direct objects preceding the past participle. When we're using qui, we are connecting it as a subject of the second part of the sentence, a subject of the verb that follows it, not a direct object, and so there's no need for agreement. Right, I'll get some example sentences so you can practice that yourself.